When things get disruptive, it's easy to lose focus. It's easy to get lost in panic or overload, particularly when you're the only group out of a larger group that is suddenly having to deal with massive overload. And also, if your organisation is mostly used to things being stable and always the same. So it's very easy to get lost, to panic. The thing that helps keep the panic at bay is some kind of focus, something that gives an anchor, or more accurately, something more like a sheet anchor in nautical terms. In other words, it's not something that holds us rigidly still, but gives us a sense of some sort of stability, some sort of directional focus. A sheet anchor is literally a sheet, a kind of parachute that's dropped out of the back of a ship, of a sailing ship, to keep it more stable in heavy winds and heavy currents. So one example of this, and one example of a focus, the one I recommend most, is a focus on vision, values and principles. Now often for this, the example I use is the TED conference. Ideas worth spreading. That's their vision. It tells us that the focus that we're going to work on is ideas. That's the assets, the focus area. Our activity is about spreading ideas, and we concentrate on the ideas that are worth spreading. Now, that the first one about focusing on ideas helps us avoid scope creep. We don't get lost trying to do something else. The focus on spreading ideas means that, it helps us avoid scope creep or context loss. And the other one about worth, these are ideas that are worth spreading, is that this tells us what the values are. The simple test is this an idea that's worth spreading? How do we assess whether this is worth spreading? So that gives us a guidance to test anything that's going on chaotic. In a chaotic environment, it seems like everything is possible. We could be looking anywhere. We're going crazy. Bring it back down to, what is the focus of this business? We deliver bread, right? We focus on bread that matters, bread that is good. Here's a good one for a baker. We are in the story of, and this is another word that's useful. Word that's useful here is the enterprise as story. We are in the story of bread that is high quality, bread that is worth eating, bread that is gluten-free, for example, which is maybe very important for some people, to know that that's safe to eat in the midst of chaos. We don't want to add someone who's having an allergy attack in the middle of a pandemic. So we're using the vision, this anchor, short anchor phrase. What is everyone working with or working on? What are you doing? What are you doing relative to the big story in relation to that overall thing? And how do you assess that it's worthwhile doing? What is your measure of success? That gives you an anchor, a vision. It gives the values that fall out of that, and the principles are the actionable values that we can then test. Am I on track to the vision? Am I on track to the values? Am I holding the values? That's what we're doing there. If we don't have a vision, or if, as is too often the case, that the vision is actually just a marketing puff, as in our vision is to be the biggest provider of, it's not about you, it's about about the whole enterprise. It's the view from the outside looking out and occasionally looking in, rather than looking from the inside the organisation, looking out at what you can sell. It's a quite different type of vision than the one that's usually described. So it's not a marketing pitch. We are serving that. And this is where another useful one, if you don't have a clear vision, a useful one to focus on is the idea of service. How do we serve? Who do we serve? What is our service? In what way do we serve the wider story? If we're in a broader enterprise, then we're playing a role in that enterprise. How can we connect with all of the other players in that story to make it happen? How do we make sure that others are there? How can we support others who are struggling in our own shared enterprise? Because if they're struggling, they're going to get us struggling eventually as well. So it's in our interest to notice the whole story and how it connects, what we can do to serve that story better. So also, who do you serve? You're not in business just solely to make shareholders make money. That's a side effect of doing your job well if you have shareholders. Your job is not to make the bank happy. Your job is to do some kind of service to a broader enterprise. You will keep the bank happy by doing it properly. But who do you serve? What values define what service is? Whenever you're in an interaction with others, to make the service happen, what are your mutual responsibilities? A classic terms and conditions, it tends to be very one-sided. It looks at the world only from the organisation's perspective. To get service happening, we need it to be symmetrical, to be balanced. What are the checks and balances that make your service work? How do you identify what is good or not good service? What does good service look like? What does not good service look like? How do you tell the difference? What can you do on the fly to maintain good service or to bend things towards serving in the way that you would like? How do you maintain service when little bits of disruption are happening all around the place? For example, a just-in-time manufacturing or just-in-time supply chain gives you a real problem if some parts of the supply chain are randomly breaking. It means that you're going to need things like buffers in your system, warehouses and so on, to make this possible. How are you going to deal with disruption in this little ways? How are you going to maintain service? So there's two focus themes that you can use to minimize and avoid the risk of overload, the risk of falling into panic. One of them is to keep a focus on vision, values and principles. Another is to focus on the idea of service and how you serve your community, your story.